Alright gang, for today's project we are going to make this low poly car. Low poly is a style that maybe gets overused a little bit and is more important if you're heading towards, say, video games where you need your file size to be much smaller and your models to be a lot simpler. But it also happens to be convenient as we're practicing making things before we move on to really high poly count sculpts. So if you look online, you'll find there's 1,000 car tutorials. I've certainly been inspired by many other people, so I'm just going to do my take on it, and away we go. Okay, so here's the finished product that we've got. You'll see this form looks like it's a little too complicated just to make out of straight up prime, so we need to get into edit mode, which we haven't touched upon before. So I'm going to hide my finished product, get out of camera mode, and Shift A to add a cube, and then we're going to dive in. Okay, here's our cube. Maybe we'll do this in shaded mode. The first thing I'd like to do is to scale this guy so that it's a little more car body shaped. I'm going to hit Tab, and Tab is going to change the look of things slightly. You'll notice a lot of different tools over here, and now we are in edit mode. So edit mode lets us select whether we're going to look at vertices, so those are the points at the end points of lines, whether we're going to look at edges or whether we look at faces. And if the whole thing is selected, I can take this guy and I can say scale it in X. It matters how close your mouse is to the center when you do this. So scale it in X, let's scale it in Y a little bit, excuse me, and then maybe scale in Z to sort of get our car started. Now, one of the benefits and potential gotchas of working in edit mode is that if I tab back out, I have this selected, and then go to N and what is it going to be? Item maybe. I can see, what is it I'm looking for? Transform, right, item and transform. So right now the location, rotation, scale, and so forth, these are all completely zeroed out. You know, of course 1 means zeroed out because it's 100%. So if I were to have made this transformation in object mode, I may need to come back through and accept those transformations. But transformations made in edit mode just go ahead and stick to the object permanently. So something you need to know. Okay, so tab back to edit mode or select it over here. And now we can get into chopping this thing up and moving it around. So right now it's certainly possible for me to grab, say, a point and to move it around, but I don't have a lot of refinement in terms of how I'm going to change this object. So we need to get in here and add what are known as edge loops. I'm in edit mode and I come down on the side and I grab this little icon that makes a loop cut, and I'm going to hover over the object and you'll see it'll default to the center, and it'll ask me, do you want to move in this direction or that direction? And I can also get this one here. So we want to make some cuts like this, but I want to make two that are evenly spaced. So I'll left click, and you may have noticed this in the past in previous tutorials. I didn't mention it, but often when you do something, you're going to wind up with a little notification down here, and that can actually be expanded. So if I open that up, I can see that the number of cuts can be controlled in this way, right? So I can make 2 cuts, or I can go, tons and tons of cuts, depending on the amount of refinement that I want. And then there's all sorts of other options. So keep an eye on this as you're adding geometry, as you're checking off the boxes on different things you want to do, because these options are only available once. Once I move away from this tool into doing something else, those options will go away and I can't really get them back. So that's worth remembering as well. Okay, so now we have a little spot here in the middle of our car. I'm going to head up at the top and do a face select, and I'll just select this face in the middle. Then I'll hit E for extrude. I will limit it to the Z axis, and then, oh, it looks like it was limited automatically, and then I can just pull this straight up. All right, so now we're starting to get more of a boxy looking car. So this kind of extrusion is really powerful. You can make super complicated forms in this way, but soon enough you're going to find that you don't want to have something that's completely orthogonal. So in order to facilitate that, instead of using a mirror modifier as we've done in the past, I'm going to show you a trick that involves going to Preferences and to Add-ons. And then if I look at Mirror, there's going to be another automatically installed library that I just have to check on called Auto Mirror. So Auto Mirror is going to help us mirror an object as we're noodling around with its edges and points and things like that. To make Auto Mirror happen, I might need to be in object mode. I can't remember. So I have the object selected, N for this local menu, and then I head down to Edit, and Auto Mirror is going to be one of the drop downs that we've installed. So I want to mirror along the y-axis right here. And depending on how you prefer to work, I like to have my edit material sort of on the lower right. And this is totally up to you, whatever works for you. And make sure you've got the rest of my options selected as well. Use clipping, for example. It's going to make sure that we don't run into problems where the faces are supposed to meet in the middle. So we're along the y-axis. I'm going to click on Auto Mirror. And initially it appears like nothing has happened, but if we did this correctly and I tab back to edit mode, now I can see I've got some black lines over here on this side and they cut off right here in the center. So now I can do some funky stuff like grab my point tool and I can take this and move it in, and I'm going to see that mirrored on the other side, right? So this is a really useful tool. I can also do stuff, for example, like grab this face, and then if I say scale, right, I can scale the whole thing in. So I get a nice little tilt, coming in on this face, and this face, and so forth. If you do this and you find some funkiness in the middle, just make sure that you have clipping turned on. That's the thing that's going to save the day here. So let's maybe go in a little bit to make this a little bit more pronounced. If I wanted, I could kind of scooch the whole thing back, right, to get like a funky looking speedboat or whatever it is. So this is the kind of thing you're just really going to have to spend some time with, because this has to do with whatever your aesthetic preferences are. So maybe I'll pull this way up and kind of make like a little El Camino looking ride. Okay, so once that's in place, what are some other tricks that I want to show you? You're going to get in here and you're going to noodle about. Maybe the next thing we'll do is to add some car tires. So let me tab back out to the real world, to Object. Shift A to add a mesh, and let's add in a cylinder for the wheel wells. And here you can see we have an example of deciding how refined we want that edge to be, but once I clicked on it and moved it, I lost access to changing that stuff. So it's always a little tricky trying to remember, but Shift A, add a cylinder, and even though I can't see it yet, I need to describe how many vertices it's supposed to have. I can hide my car, I guess would be a good way to do this. So here, if I wanted to go for that really low poly thing, I could just make this into like 6 sides or something like that. Why is this guy coming back? Interesting. Maybe that's a little bit too much, so I'll put this somewhere around 10. And then if I wanted to, I could also handle my rotation right here. So let's rotate it around X 90 degrees, and then I can start to move this thing around. Okay, cool. And I'll collapse that down because I don't need it for right now. Okay, so we're going to get these sort of wheel wells in place. It's up to you, how refined you want that curve to look. That's just a personal choice. And we also have to decide how far this is going to penetrate into the body of the car. So maybe I'll make it, about yay deep or whatever. Now I can take this guy and I can add a mirror modifier because we're also centered on either side of the y-axis as well. So let's go over here to cylinder 2 and the modifiers. I can say mirror. I'm mirroring along the x-axis, and I'm going to sample the car as the object. So, you'll do that if you want them the exact same distance from the center, but you could also kind of eyeball this as well. Now further, I don't know if I'll be able to do this, but I want to take these 2 objects and then flip them over to that side. For that, I might need a join. Although, you know what? Because we're auto-mirroring, we should only have to do this on one side. Okay, great. So let's come in here and grab our car. Which already has, this is the mirror modifier that was added by Auto Mirror. So let's go ahead and add a new one. This will be a Boolean. Okay, and we have to select our objects. These are the objects. You can see that little cutaway took place. And if I hide these cylinders, I can kind of get a sense of where that's heading. Although you notice that it hasn't flipped to the other side, and I'm guessing that we have to accept these changes for this to work. So we applied them. And then now we get it on both sides. Okay, cool. So we're going to leave this other mirror modifier live because we want to be able to keep noodling around with the points and so forth. So now let's add in some tires once we've got our wheel wells. So I will, I suppose I could just use these cylinders right here. We will scale them down a little bit so they're already in the right location, so that's convenient. We probably want to scale them in the y-axis, so they do something like that, and then maybe we will pull them in so they're kind of tucked into the car right there. That's looking pretty good. And we can also start to add some materials, right? So if I come over to material, let's grab this guy and just make him something like maybe in the green territory, we'll make a green car. Down here for the wheels, we can add a material and make that black. I'm just going to kind of rush through this a little bit, and then you can come back in and make it more interesting. Okay, so maybe a couple more new ideas for you. Let's go to our wheels, and I'll look at these straight on. Whoops. I always forget to hold shift for pan. I'm going to tab into edit mode, and then I only need to work on the one because this one should inherit it. And I want to find just this face. So I'll click here on this face and then hit I for inset. So that'll let me start to drag down, and then I can make a differential between like the hubcap color and the rubber of the tire. So we'll do something like that. And you can just keep on going, right? You can insert more faces, and then once those faces are inserted, then you can extrude them and, push them in and out if you want to make things fancy like that. I'm just going to stick to one of these for the purposes of this demo. So if I tab back out of edit mode, if I look at this thing in terms of material, everything's still black. Okay, so we have these black tires that are entirely black, and things start to get a little bit trickier when you want to get in there and take an object and make certain faces a different material than other faces on the shared object. So we'll click on the tire, tab into edit mode, and you'll see it says material right here. So if you try to say minus, which you might be inspired to do, that's actually deleting the material itself in general, which the program will prevent you from doing. So I want to select that one right there, and then say new, and assign. And you can see now we get that default white. I have to hit new again, and then now I can make that base color, something in the gray territory or something like that. So again, get down in here, make these things reflective, play around with them and so forth, but I'm just trying to give you the basics. And now we can tab back out of edit mode. That's looking good. And then we just want these wheels to show up on the other side of the car. So we will add another mirror modifier. I always get lost in here, mirror. And this is going to be on either side of the y-axis. Don't forget which one you're looking at. It's actually this one on the bottom. And so I want that on Y, and I want it mirrored on this object. Great. So now we have a car with 4 tires, even though we only had to define those tires once. And as you're moving, once you feel confident with these, you can always come back in here and apply stuff. Just make sure you're applying it in the right order so you don't wind up losing some tires. So we can use the same philosophy for making windows in this car. If I click on the car, tab into object mode, face select, and select this face right here, I can hit I for inset. So to address the fact that my window is growing from the center, right, I need to uncheck boundary, and then that'll cause it to come all the way up to our mirror plane, and then I'm just kind of eyeballing how big that's going to be, so that looks good. Okay, and then we'll go through the same steps that we went through before, where we've got face select, I pick here. If I head over to materials, I'll see we have a material already, so I want to make a new one and assign it, make that new, and then we'll call this something, because we're not making it, transparent, so something that's kind of in the gray-blue territory is going to look nice. Got it. And, if you want to be extra good, you can get through here and call this window, call this car body, and so forth, etc., etc. Okay, come back at a tab, and our car is really coming along. If I want, I can also add in, for example, a plane on the ground and start to see how this thing is going to render with shadows and so forth, but I'm going to leave that up to you because we know how to do that at this point. And now we can just start getting in here and making the car more complex, right? So if I tab back into edit mode, let's say, for example, that I want to add in some more edge loops. That edge loop should be mirrored on the other side, so I only have to do it once. And then I can come in with my point selection. So maybe we can make this like an old school car that kind of has these like fins on the back and stuff. Maybe I could make like a real big fin right here. I could even do sort of a little hump right here to kind of account for the nose of the car and the motor. So get in there, think about making doors. You could add on side view mirrors sticking out. The last thing that I'll show you explicitly is the lights, because that's a type of material we haven't worked with before, and then I'll leave you to it to get creative. So tab back out. Okay, so our light can be Shift A, something as simple as just a cylinder or a sphere. I think I'm going to go with cylinder. And this time I'm going to turn the polygons up just so that it's not distracting at a smaller scale. Let's bring this over. I will rotate it around the x-axis 90 degrees. Scale that guy pretty far down. And now I want to rotate it around the z-axis 90 degrees to get it aligned just right. Maybe I'll switch back to wireframe mode to see what I'm doing, and then just kind of place that generally and see how we like it. Shaded. And then I'll stick that back down into the car itself. Maybe that's a little close to my edges. So let's drag that back down a little bit, like this. And then like that. Something like that looks pretty good. Okay, back to material preview. Now I'll click on this object and we'll make it a new material. Let's call this material headlight. And I'll leave the base color maybe somewhere in the yellow territory, because headlights, at least on older cars, didn't tend to be white like LEDs. And then as we head down, what we're looking for now is emission. So emission down here by default with an opaque object that's not producing light will be black, because black light, of course, doesn't look like anything. But if I turn this all the way up to white, and then my emission strength I can mess with, now we have what looks like an actual light that's going to project. And it's cool, right? If you put a plane in, you'll actually see this kind of showing up on the ground. And that might be a little too hot, so we might kind of turn the emission strength down a little bit. It goes fast. So it's up to you exactly how high you want that to be. Just like before, add a modifier. We should be getting used to this at this point. Mirror. We're mirroring along the y-axis, and we are sampling our car. And then we get some headlights like that. So in classic form, do as I say and not as I do. This car is a little uninspiring at the moment, but now you've got some ideas about how to get in there and make it interesting and unique. You can put some brake lights on there, some backup lights. You could put on an antenna, all the other features that you might associate with a car. And I want you also to think about the different kinds of vehicles out there. So you could make a hearse or a fire truck, ambulance, some kind of construction vehicle. There's really a lot of ways to go about it. So use my stuff as a jumping off point and see what you can come up with in this low poly style.